Hello, Bill.
Good morning, Matt.
Welcome to the DMZ, everybody.
December 1st, Thursday morning. Uh, have you fully recovered from Thanksgiving?
I have because Thanksgiving is also my anniversary, my wife and I's anniversary. So we usually after Thanksgiving go away for a couple days and relax and just hang out together. And so that really recharges the batteries. So I'm feeling good, Bill.
That was not my Thanksgiving. We did make the innovative decision to not make a full turkey.
Mm-hmm.
So once you take the turkey making off the table, that definitely relieves a lot of Thanksgiving stress.
Yeah, I find that once you take the children out of the equation, it
Hey,
also
I, I,
helps.
I, I salute your bold innovation. Don't get me wrong.
Well, we
Uh,
intentionally got married Thanksgiving week 17 years ago with the intention that we could basically, whether it was the honeymoon or one of these little getaways, that on our anniversary, it's a good time to get away. And, because my wife's job is pretty demanding, with especially when Congress is in session, it's a really nice thing because most people are not going to bother you Thanksgiving weekend.
mhm.
So it's worked out to be. So if anybody out there is thinking about when to get married, everybody wants to get married in June.
Mhm.
Think about Thanksgiving week.
Now, did you have a big wedding?
No, our wedding wasn't that big. It was pretty small. You want to take a guess where our wedding reception was?
Well, you're always in Arizona, so I'm going to assume Arizona.
No. This is funny in light of what has happened to the Republican Party. But our wedding reception, we got married at a church in Old Town Alexandria, Virginia. But our wedding reception was at the Capitol Hill Club, which is the Republican
Mhm.
club
Mhm.
on Capitol Hill in Washington D.C. Like
Mhm.
literally, we got married at the Republican Party's essentially. I mean, that is actually where I think it's where the RNC is actually based in the same building, and the NRCC is based there as well. That's how Republican our wedding was.
But you could get away with a November wedding because you weren't inviting people from all over the country to
Yeah,
come visit you.
there were maybe like 20 people there,
Yeah,
something like that.
because I mean, if you did a big invite, they'd be like, "These schmucks are doing this on Thanksgiving. They know I can't come. It's an invitation."
Yeah, I I think there is as a conservative, I think there's something to be said for these big weddings and all that, but this is for us. It worked out great, and so I would recommend it. It wasn't because sort of no fuss, no muss.
Now, did you send out a big invite list so you still get the gifts,
No,
but you keep the wedding costs down, profiting on the whole endeavor?
no, we just wanted to keep the wedding. We didn't care about the gifts. We just wanted to keep the wedding costs down and also the hassle. So it worked out well. I was just telling my kids the other day because we were watching. I don't know if you saw the um, the new Santa Claus. It's not a movie; it's a TV show with Tim Allen
I saw I,
reprising.
I saw an ad for it, but I haven't seen it.
It's really good. It's well done. And in the beginning is I believe it's Casey Wilson of Saturday Night Live fame. And I was telling the boys, I think it's her who's in this one scene. If I'm wrong, forgive me, but she's been in HBO shows, and she was on SNL, and she's been in movies. And I was telling my sons, like, you see that woman, like her. I'm friends with her dad, and her dad actually uh, paid for a professional photographer at our wedding, and also he's a Republican political
Mhm.
consultant named Paul Wilson, and he took it upon himself to take photos at our wedding, and he actually pissed off our minister because he got like he was like getting really close as we were like getting married. And he's just one of those really interesting, fun guys. And I was like, yeah, her dad paid for our photographer at our wedding. So what an interesting world it is.
Well, I'm glad you got to get away. I'm glad you had kid-free days. Those are special days. When you came back to reality, um, how are you feeling about the state of the Republican Party now that not only do you have Trump in the 2024 race officially, but he kicked it off by dining with Nick Fuentes, who is a racist and an anti-Semite.
So the place where Aaron and I went has this awesome. It was the Ritz Carlton in Georgetown. And Bill, I don't know if you've ever been there, but they have this really awesome lobby. It doesn't even feel like a lobby. It's like a living room where essentially all the people who are staying there hang out. So there's the Christmas tree and the fireplace. And it's a great place to just sit. It's much bigger than your room. You sit there. You can order a drink, even we got to know different people, talk to people there. And I do a lot of reading. And one of the things I was rereading, I know this doesn't sound terribly romantic, but my wife and I just watched the Looming Tower TV series that came out a few years ago, which I think is very well done. So I decided to reread the Lawrence Wright, Pulitzer Prize winning book, The Looming Tower. And I'm reading the book, and then I'm checking in on Twitter. I mean, I didn't watch any cable news really while I was there, but I'm still following Twitter here and there. And as I'm reading the book, and the movie, the Looming Tower TV show focuses pretty much exclusively on the events leading up to 9/11 directly, like the bombing of the Cole and things like that. But the book starts in the 1940s when Syed Khattab comes to the United States of America. I assume, have you read the book, Bill?
I've not read the book.
So Hugh Hewitt, this was one of his like litmus tests. If you hadn't read that book, you were done, so I had to read the book. It starts with Syed Khattab, who comes to America, and instead of it liberalizing him, he becomes radicalized by it. And he goes back to Egypt, and he joins the Muslim Brotherhood, and he ends up becoming a martyr. And his writings and his philosophy really trickled down ultimately to like Zawahiri and to then Bin Laden, and the rest is history. But as I'm reading the book, I got like one eye on the book and then one eye on Twitter, on cable news or whatever they're talking about. And it really hit me like how these young men who were becoming radical Islamists are not that different, not that different from people like Nick Fuentes, who really don't believe in liberalism. They really don't believe in liberal democracy. They believe that America has become decadent and secular and that we are weak. They have a lot in common. So I wrote a piece about it for The Beast, but that was my experience, Bill. It didn't bum me out. We still had a great time, but as I was reading this book and then watching what was happening with Trump on Twitter, and I was more focused, I think, on the Nick Fuentes angle than on Trump and Kanye specifically. But it really occurred to me how this philosophy about how like we need a theocracy and democracy's over, and we need to be powerful and strong, and it's pervasive, and I really do think that on the fringe right now, the Fuenteses of the world, their worldview is very similar to that of radical Islamists in a weird way.
Now, for a long time, Democrats, liberals, progressives have long charged conservatives with, you see phrases like American Taliban, for example.
Yeah.
They want to ban books, they want to ban abortion, they want to ban contraception, they want to essentially control your lives, they want theocracy. Are you giving that critique credence by making this comparison between Fuentes. I mean, here's Fuentes. You're saying is like the Muslim Brotherhood. Uh, he is dining with Donald Trump, who is the frontrunner candidate for the 2024 Republican Party. I mean, is this what the Republican Party has actually become?
I would say that I never liked it when liberals, progressives would make that charge about mainstream conservatives, and I still think it's bogus. I mean, I'm a part of the Christian right, so to speak, and I could tell you that what mainstream Christian conservatives at least wanted was, number one, obviously, religious liberty, the freedom to practice, but we want to win souls to Christ by legitimate conversion and persuasion, and to the degree that we do want to be involved in politics, trying to bring about a more virtuous society, but throughout the rules of liberal democracy and pluralism. And that's a stark contrast to what people like Fuentes want. What they want is essentially a theocracy, and they want to impose their version of the common good on people by the use of force. So it's a stark contrast to what I believe.
Now, I've not read a lot of Fuentes' writings, but is it fair to call him a theocrat? He is religiously motivated in his anti-Semitism and his white supremacy.
Mm-hmm. It's actually, he's like he wants a Catholic. He wants, this isn't solely Catholic. There are a lot of Catholics now who are buying into this sort of theocratic thing. But there's an evangelical version of it too that like Michael Flynn is a part of. But yeah, he specifically, I mean, I would say he's a neo-Nazi. I'm speaking of Fuentes. Mm-hmm. He's a neo-Nazi. He's a Holocaust denier. He's an anti-Semite. I would also say he's a Catholic theocrat. Mm-hmm. And he said during one interview or one video he did, he's also a chauvinist. I mean, he said that he doesn't want to go back to 1999. He wants to go back to 1099, mm-hmm. the Middle Ages. He mm-hmm. wants women to not have the right to vote, to have to wear veils, at least in church. This is some weird stuff, as George W. Bush might say.
Now, you have Kanye West bringing Fuentes to Trump, then debriefing with Fuentes, or did you do it with Milo? I can't keep track of all these names. I try to forget, and they keep coming back. Say how Trump was impressed with Fuentes because he was a Trump loyalist, and Trump was mad at him because he was going to run against him for president. Then Trump says, "Well, I was going to have dinner with Kanye, but he just shows up with Fuentes. I don't know who this guy is, but there's no condemning mm-hmm. of Fuentes in the statement." And that's followed by this kind of slow burn of other Republicans saying that it was bad that he had dinner, but kind of stopping short of blaming Trump for it. Mm-hmm. People shouldn't have dinner with this guy. And I'm sure if Trump knew better, if he knew about him, he wouldn't have done it. I mean, isn't this is the same old dance that happened throughout the Trump presidency, where Trump would do a really bad thing, and Republicans would kind of hem and haw about it and kind of say it was bad, but not blame Trump himself for it. Mm-hmm. So they don't get on the bad side of Trump supporters, which is why you're still stuck with Trump being the titular leader of the party. So has anybody learned anything in the past 5 years?
No. I mean, I do think, well, not really. I mean, there's really no way there's no way for Trump to look good here, right? I mean, number one, he is knowingly having dinner with Kanye West, who is at this point very clearly an anti-Semite in his own right. Mm-hmm. Not only by association, but by virtue of what he
this is his own statements
says multiple times. So it's not misspeaking. Then you've got the fact that Trump really ought to know who Nick Fuentes is. I mean, if you're
he was at Charlottesville.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, you ought to know who he is. So if you don't know who he is, that's kind of an indictment on you. if someone can just make his way into a meeting with the president, a dinner with the president, without being vetted and everyone knowing who they are, like that's a problem. And then, of course, after finding out who he is, Trump could have completely disavowed him, which he didn't do. He says, I don't know who he is, but he doesn't say, and this guy's a scumbag and whatever. And so there's really no way of looking at this that paints Trump in a flattering picture. But I mean, to your point, yeah, I think that even Mitch McConnell, I think Mitt Romney gave a good condemnation of it, but Romney has long kind of been doing that, so it's not a change. Mitch McConnell was pretty good, but then he had this thing where he basically he turned into a pundit where he said, like, I don't think anyone who has a meeting, who has dinner with a guy like this, is likely to become president, which is like, that's not a moral statement or a moral condemnation. He says, like, there's no place in the Republican Party for anti-Semites. Well, actually, he's wrong. He's documentably, provenly wrong. Like, there is a place. There shouldn't be, but there is. So it's nice to hear McConnell say that, but it's actually not true. There's no room in the Republican Party for anti-Semites. Wrong. There actually is. And then he says something to the effect of, I doubt very seriously that anyone who has dinner with someone like this could be elected president. Well, big deal. That's, you've been wrong before in terms of your prognostication. And so even Mitch McConnell, who gave maybe the strongest rebuke of anyone, wasn't that strong. What do you think?
Well, right. I mean, I think that it's still kid gloves treatment. There's people at the highest levels of the Republican Party are not willing to tell Donald Trump to get out, that you are not a Republican. You're corrupted this party. You've ruined us in the last 3 election cycles, and you're a cancer that needs to be excised. No one's willing to do that, or very, very few. Now, I don't know if you saw that this was a Rolling Stone article from yesterday that said, according to 3 people with knowledge of the directives, DeSantis's lieutenants have told his allies not to attack Trump over the now notorious dinner. Instead, the potential 2024 Republican primary candidate, his advisors have aimed to keep the focus on Trump's decision to dine with Kanye West, a vocal anti-Semite, and Nick Fuentes, a white supremacist agitator. Says Dan Eberhardt, a longtime GOP donor and former big Trump donor, recalling his conversation with Team DeSantis, quote, in ongoing discussions following his re-election, including this week, I've been asked to keep my powder dry. My understanding is that the DeSantis team doesn't see the upside in kicking off the fight with Trump this early, even if it may be inevitable. Waiting into the Fuentes fiasco just isn't worth it for them. The media will harpoon Trump without Team DeSantis lifting a finger. So, is this DeSantis being clever and just waiting for his moment to bring it to Trump? Or is this just another Republican who can't bring himself to say what's obvious, that this is disqualifying behavior and that people who support Fuentes and Kanye should not be considered Republicans?
I mean, I think it's both, but I am fine with Ron DeSantis being the one person who does whatever it takes strategically to be positioned to take out Trump. And I think it's sad that the analysis that Team DeSantis has come up with is actually probably good advice from a purely strategic standpoint. Now, it's not like Ron DeSantis is the only person in the Republican Party or in America who can voice moral criticism of what Trump has done. And if Ron DeSantis were to come out and to give a strong rebuke of what Trump did and of Fuentes, it would be nice to hear. I don't know that it would really make a huge difference. So I'm okay with DeSantis keeping his powder dry and doing what he needs to do strategically to ultimately beat Trump.
But if you don't say bluntly that this entire movement is bad news, anti-Semitism is bad. White supremacy is bad. Nick Fuentes is bad. Nick Fuentes' followers are bad, and they're not Republicans. We don't want them in the Republican Party. If you can't say that, then they are. Then they're part of it, aren't they? You're still
number
hustling
one,
for
I'm
their
not
votes.
sure that I'm not sure Ron DeSantis is the gatekeeper of what gets in the Republican Party and what doesn't. Like, I don't know if you read Carlos Lozado's piece criticizing Pence, right?
Yeah.
If you haven't read it, I think it's those out there who haven't read it, it's worth reading. It's brutal, but in a good way. I think Pence deserves it. But Carlos Lozado makes a point in a very, I don't know, he did it in a very pithy way. I don't know if you remember how he described it, but he basically said that the reason that Mike Pence, like ironically, the reason Mike Pence was able to be the hero on January 6th is that he was a toady until January 6th.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if do you think I've accurately described?
That's right. That's right.
Okay. So I guess what I'm saying is we live right now, and the Republican Party is certainly a perverse institution. Okay. And I wish that you could get ahead by being courageous and forthright and moral and virtuous, but you can't. If Ron DeSantis starts becoming the conscience of the conservatism, so to speak, if DeSantis becomes the conscience of conservatism, he will quickly become Mike Pence. Okay, and so in a weird way, Ron DeSantis has to play this game and keep his powder dry and preserve his credibility. And the sad thing is, he has to, people talk about like virtue signaling. DeSantis has to vice signal. It's an effed up paradigm. But
isn't that bad for conservatism and the GOP long term if you can't call this out?
It's horrible.
And
it's absolutely horrible, Bill. What I'm talking about is we are in the Republican Party, the conservative movement is in a horrible state of affairs. And but if Ron DeSantis, number one, if anybody's going to stop Trump, it's probably going to be Ron DeSantis. And if Ron DeSantis is going to be the person to do it, he is going to have to engage in some unseemly and very shrewd and very cautious techniques and strategies in the next year. And I am allowing him this room to do what he needs to do.
I'm just like convinced. I think we had this discussion last week, so I don't want to repeat ourselves. But I'm not convinced that Ron DeSantis is this really decent guy that has to be clever and coy to navigate the minefield. But so righteousness and decency can win out at the end of the day. Like, he just may be similarly awful and is willing to traffic with awful people to get to where he wants to go to have power.
I mean, it could be meet the new boss, same as the old boss, or even worse. The danger is, people say, the danger is that Ron DeSantis is just as bad as Trump, just as authoritarian, but more competent and more disciplined. And David Frum talks about the velociraptors learning to work the doorknob. Well, maybe the velociraptor is DeSantis, who watched Trump and learned. And so I am totally sympathetic to the notion that Ron DeSantis is no hero. However, if we're going to operate on the assumption that Donald Trump is uniquely bad, he's the only person I know who's tried to overthrow an election and tried to stop the peaceful transfer of power. And so if we view him as an existential threat and we want to stop him, first, I think you have to try everything you can to stop him in the Republican Party before he wins the nomination. Because, look, if Trump wins the Republican nomination, Joe Biden could literally fall on his face the week before the election. There could be a horrible recession. Once you win the nomination, you have a chance to become president. And so I think Ron DeSantis, I would love it, Bill, if we lived in a Republican Party or in a world where the Republican Party wanted Mike Pence or Marco Rubio or even Glenn Youngkin. I just feel like DeSantis at this point seems like the best bet. And I wonder if DeSantis came out today and did what I want him to do, if he was the hero today, would that work? Unfortunately, I fear that if DeSantis did and said the things that I would applaud, that he would become Mike Pence, or he would become all the people that Trump has basically destroyed. And so I'm giving him this like dispensation, if that's the right word, this allowance to kind of do what he needs to do, what he thinks he needs to do.
Now, you called my attention to a column by Henry Olsen at the Washington Post that was from a few days ago, which is titled "The GOP's Path to Dumping Trump Will Be Torturous." And he basically breaks down the party into four groups: Mega MAGA, Old Guard, MAGA Adjacent, and Never Trump. And he estimates the first three of those are about 30% of the party, and the Never Trumpers are about 10%. And so you got to find a way to solve the puzzle of putting these coalition pieces in the right array, so Trump can't get a plurality of primary voters. He talks about, for example, MAGA adjacent is the hardest for most observers to pin down. These people like Trump for both his style and substance, but are not extremely devoted to him personally. And so DeSantis is their man of the hour. So note these forces are balanced. If DeSantis sours and some MAGA adjacent voters go back to Trump, then the final two candidates will be Trump and whichever old guard candidate, that's more of a Reagan-like candidate, can solidify his or her position. But if DeSantis stays strong and the old guard remains split, then DeSantis will make it to the final round. The old guard voters have to decide who the nominee will be. This could put Never Trumpers in the driver's seat. Will they get behind an old guarder, or will they back DeSantis as the lesser of two evils, which is kind of where you seem to be right now? A Never Trumper willing to go with a MAGA adjacent person to stop a mega MAGA. But the way Olsen describes it, there's different ways that these pieces come into place. So depending on how viable he ends up being.
Yes. A couple of things to unpack there. So Trump has 30%, according to Olsen, Trump has 30% of the vote locked in. That's sort of his floor, 30%. Those are the mega MAGA. Then you've got the MAGA adjacent. And if you add the mega MAGA and the MAGA adjacent, you're at 60%. And that's why Mike Pence, Bill, doesn't have a chance, right? Mike Pence can't get the mega MAGA and he can't get the MAGA adjacent. Seems highly unlikely. So at best, Mike Pence, could get 40% of the vote. That is if we believe the Henry Olsen theory, right? The old guard and the Never Trumpers. I don't know if I'm old guard or Never Trumper. I'm not sure which, but whatever. Together, that's only 40%. That's about what Mike Pence could get on a good day, like on his best day. So you can see, obviously, it's a problem if you have a whole bunch of candidates, like a large field dividing up the vote. I guess you could envision a scenario where someone like a Glenn Youngkin could piece together the Never Trumpers and the old guard. That gets him to 40%, let's say. And then maybe he splits the Trump adjacent.
Little MAGA adjacent.
Yeah, the MAGA adjacent. And maybe, but I'm not saying that Henry Olsen's theory is, the gospel, but it seems like a plausible theory to me. And if we buy into that, it seems to me that, Trump can win and DeSantis could win and maybe Youngkin can win. Bill, I'm having a hard time, if this is the premise, I'm having a hard time envisioning kind of anyone else having a shot.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of game left here to play. So
Yeah, I mean,
I don't.
that's the
Yeah.
obvious caveat. But
But
right now, at this point,
I do think there's an argument that, again, not to say this is a likely scenario, but that Trump and DeSantis could hold each other down and make it hard for either one of them to get beyond 30%. And if establishment types can find a third horse to consolidate around, this is always the problem in 2016. Trump was never getting 50% of the vote in the primaries, but the establishment people were so weak they couldn't consolidate around an alternative to outflank him. And there clearly are enough MAGA adjacent Republicans saying, I don't love the guy, but I'll go along for the ride, for him to get, in the case of Trump, getting him breaking 40 in primaries, and that being enough to win a sufficient number of delegates. It requires some fortitude and some strategizing amongst people who don't want the Republican Party to descend into madness, to get behind somebody, who's going to respect the basic democracy and equality. That still seems to be missing. We still don't see, even after this primary, this midterm, where clearly Trump-like-minded candidates were dead weight, threw away winnable races for Republicans at almost every level. Over at Bolt's magazine, there was an analysis done that in the state legislative races, this is after past midterms, you saw 200 to 600 gains from the opposition party. Republicans gained 22 state legislative seats in this midterm. So it's not even just like they lost a few Senate seats.
Yeah,
they lost a few governor's races. This is up and down the ballot that they were weakened by this, and there's clearly consternation amongst Republicans, but not in my mind an urgency. This is a 5-alarm fire problem to put out, even if it means we don't win the next election. This is just going to keep killing us and killing us and killing us if we don't just stamp it out.
Well, consider the state that the Republican Party finds itself in right now, Bill, with having just gotten this huge warning that they received, right? So hitting in, think of the presidential race. Trump just had dinner with a neo-Nazi. But even if DeSantis wins, Trump will sabotage him. That 30% that Trump controls, what percent of the 30% would go with Trump if he either launched a third-party bid or simply tried to sabotage DeSantis in a general election? Let's say 10%. That probably dooms the Republican nominee. You've also got, right now, Kevin McCarthy's speakership is not clear that he will be the speaker, but even if he is, it's going to be a clown caucus. Marjorie Taylor Greene is set to become the face of the GOP. Greene and Boebert are both going to get their committees back. You've got an RNC that is having elections that feature Mike Lindell, the My Pillow guy. And right now, an election denial could cost the GOP a House seat in Arizona. I don't know if you saw that.
I don't think that's going to happen that way. This is because Cochise County was refusing to certify its election. And so if the Secretary of State, which is now Katie Hobbs, says, I don't have votes from you, and so I got to zero out your votes, that would throw Arizona 6 to the Democrat. I'm not sure she can actually do that, or if she wants to do that. I think it's more that Cochise County has to certify their election. Like the judicial power is going to be like, hey, Cochise County, you have to certify this. You don't have the statutory leeway to not certify. Mm-hmm. But even if somehow those votes were zeroed out, the House of Representatives is the final arbiter of who gets seated, and they could say, look, Cochise County is just being ridiculous, but we all know who got the most votes here, Republican, you get seated. So yeah. I don't think they're going to throw away that seat. Go
even
on.
if we assume that one bullet point is not going to manifest, I've just laid out a litany of problems. I mean,
Yeah.
they've got 99 problems right now.
Right. Now, do you think, what are the odds McCarthy is speaker?
That he becomes speaker?
He actually becomes speaker.
Maybe 60%.
Mhm.
I guess the problem is, even though McCarthy has major problems, it's hard to envision someone else getting getting what is it, 218, however many.
Unless people, abstain, vote present,
Yeah.
don't show up, that could reduce the majority threshold.
So even though I can conceive of McCarthy not getting enough votes, it's hard to envision someone else getting enough, right? So I don't know, what 60%. What do you say?
I'm really torn here because when Pelosi was having a math problem, I made the point that these jokers don't really have a strategy to actually defeat Pelosi because you can't beat somebody with nobody. Uh, they don't really have a real argument against Pelosi beyond basic ageism. Just move out of the way for a younger person, which isn't a sufficient argument to rally the troops behind. And so Pelosi picked them off one by one with a concession here and a concession there that were pretty minor concessions. So on the Republican side now, they don't have somebody. They don't have an alternative. So they come up with this fight with a basic weakness. But are they more nihilistic? Can
Yes.
they drag this out?
Yes, they are.
Because they don't care. They don't have anybody. But it does still come down to, what do they want out of this? So they just want to burn it down for the sake of burning it down and never having it. The thing is, if that was their bent, we just like burning things down. We just like not playing ball and sowing chaos. The end result that could well be that a handful of moderate Republicans say, screw this, we're gonna vote with Democrats for some neutral party. We'll dust off Justin Amash or bring back John Boehner. You don't have to be a sitting congressperson to be speaker. Someone who will commit to putting things on the floor.
Yeah. Why don't we've never, I mean, I don't think we've ever seen House moderate Republicans exercise any sort of leadership or power. They do have power at this point, right? When it's this narrow, any block is powerful, and yet it's the right wing that is, really flexing their muscles. It seems unlikely to me that this would happen, Bill. But why is that?
Well, I mean, I'm not expecting a super jolt of courage from House moderates to the extent they even exist. I'm just saying, I think it is possible for the nihilists to take things so far, to make it so ridiculous that becomes a palatable option for them.
It would not be. It would. I think it would have to be after a lot of votes and
9, 10 ballots or something,
right.
where the House literally can't function. They can't keep the lights on, and so you get a handful of Republicans saying, "Okay, we're going to keep the lights on by putting someone in power who will put bills on the floor to keep the lights on."
But anyway, the Republican Party has all these problems, and we're less than 2 years out, obviously, from the 2024 presidential race, and so I mean, there's a lot could change between now and then. But there doesn't seem to be any urgency. Well, there doesn't seem to be a sense that like, wow, we've got a lot of problems. We better fix it. Now there is, Bill. I'm sure you saw this. The RNC. As of now, I guess it's the RNC, but Republicans are putting together a commission to study what went wrong. But Blake Masters is on the commission. So I'm not sure.
Your father's autopsy.
The autopsy, yeah. I'm not sure how insightful this is going to be.
Well, I mean, how much is the tail still going to wag the dog? But to get back to the speaker debate, do you think there's something that the Freedom Caucus people want that McCarthy can give them?
Well, I think that what they want is power. It's not, the things that they want are not policy preferences per se. What they want is more power. And so that's what he's going to have to give them.
What does that mean if it's not
Well,
policy based?
it means elevating crazy people to better positions in leadership and on committees. It means changing rules so that McCarthy is more respondent and threatened, endangered
They
by
want
them.
they want to make it easier to get rid of a speaker, right? They want
That's
to.
one of the things, right? So that means that McCarthy, even if he manages to give away all these concessions to become speaker, will then continue to be just as beholden to them after he becomes speaker as he was before he got it.
I mean, and this just brings me back to my consistent point on this show. When are Republicans going to say we can't let the tail wag the dog? I mean, how they all know that a Freedom Caucus defined House Republican Conference and Republican Party writ large is not a good Republican Party to win the 2024 elections. We're starting to see stories about how bad the 2024 Senate map is for Democrats because they got way more seats up for re-election than Republicans do. I think all the Republican seats are pretty much like pretty ruby red Republican seats, and Democrats have to defend John Tester in Montana and Scher Brown in Ohio and Joe Manchin in West Virginia. These are all very Trumpy states. And so I'm not saying that Democrats have no reason to be worried here because they do. But I think they're going to get a 1-seat cushion out of Georgia. So that means Republicans would need to flip 2 seats to take the Senate if a Democrat won the presidency. It'd be just 1 seat if there was a Republican president. And so you can get there, 2 out of 3 of those 3 red state Democrats.
But here's, and you're right, Bill. I would just throw in the one caveat. What is the Republican Party doing today that would prevent them from making the same mistakes they made in 2022 in terms of candidate quality? For example, if you are Chris Sununu or Doug Ducey of Montana or whatever the state is, you pick the state that's going to be West Virginia, whatever the state is that's going to be on the ballot in 2024, that will be a pickup opportunity for Republicans in the Senate. If you're the Chris Sununu of that state, if you're the Doug Ducey of that state, if you're the Brian Kemp of that state, what has changed? What's going to change between now and 2024 that would inspire you to run for office, as opposed to Blake Masters, for example, or Herschel Walker of that state running?
This is why the Senate Republicans should look at the speaker fight as the first fight they have to win. They should start exerting, they should flex their muscle. They should say, tail can't wag the dog, Freedom Caucus, shut up. If it means we got to have a bipartisan speaker, fine. We're going to function. We're going to be sane. We're going to keep the lights on. We're gonna raise the debt limit so we don't have a debt default. If they're not willing to put the far right in their place now, when are they ever going to do it?
Yeah. No,
I think they can't do it now. They risk 2024.
They do. I do think that if you are a loyal Republican and a never Trumper, there's you could argue an acceleration theory here, like an almost like the worse the better theory. I mean, you could say, look, we have tried to reform the Republican Party. We have tried to bring them to their senses. The market is not going to even persuade them. They've lost 3 elections. It needs to get worse. Let them, in fact, accelerate it, get worse. Make Mike Lindell the chair of the RNC. Nominate Donald Trump again to run. And it actually may be the fact that the quickest way to save the Republican Party is to destroy the village to save it. You could argue that. My concern is that we don't have the power to guarantee Trump could win. You could nominate Trump under the guise that he is going to be an easy that he's going to lose, and something crazy could happen in the world, and he would become president again. So I don't think that we can do that kind of strategic, that we have the luxury of that theory. If you're a responsible actor, I don't think you have the luxury of that. What do you think, Bill?
You don't have the luxury of burning it all down.
I don't think so. I think you have to be in the business of putting out fires and trying to mitigate problems, not, not making them worse under the theory.
No, yeah, no, I agree with that. They should be following the McConnell playbook and not the Trump playbook. McConnell put the Republicans in a position to keep the focus on Democratic failings and position themselves as a party serious about governing. And Trump came in and blew it by putting forth a list of candidates that didn't fit that mold at all. And they became the face of the party. There's no reminders that, hey, we help be competitive with China by investing in semiconductors. We want to have a good infrastructure too. There was none of that neutralizing of issues. It was only focus on election denialism and abortion bans and stuff like that. So I would, if I was doing the autopsy, I would say this is not McConnell's fault. This is Trump's fault. We've done Trump's way for a long time. It's burned us repeatedly. It's not like this is a fluky election. This is 3 strikes and you're out. And if the Freedom Caucus isn't gonna get wise to this, then we have to isolate them by winning the speaker fight one way or another.
I've said it before and I'll say it again, but 2016, Donald Trump defeated an incredibly unpopular candidate and still lost the popular vote. And because of that, when everything else, Republicans, who was it that said, John Ziegler. I just had John Ziegler on the podcast, Bill. And John Ziegler said it was like a gambler who makes a long shot bet, and it pays off. And he just keeps doubling down and betting the same bet over and over again, even though it keeps losing. He thinks eventually he's going to strike gold again and double down. And that was a pretty good analogy, I thought.
Yep. When you were talking about, putting out fires or burning it down, this is a hard segue. We didn't plan to talk about this, but made me think about cryptocurrency.
Oh yeah.
Because you're seeing the war nights talk about, okay, we need to start regulating crypto, and not letting this be a Wild West. And I'm kind of like, I don't want to regulate crypto. I want to ban crypto. Crypto is a completely useless device that nobody needs, and it's just, all it does is cause problems. I don't need to save it. I need it to go away.
But couldn't we also see crypto as a sort of a Darwinian thing that let other people waste their money on Ponzi schemes?
Obviously that could cause some, to the extent it becomes intermingled with the whole global economy, you might have some decent people get dragged down in it the same way people got dragged down when Lehman Brothers collapsed. Currency is regulated. You can't just make up a dollar. Only dollars are dollars created by the federal government. That's how currency has worked for a long time.
Well, apparently there are these coins. Do you know about this? I don't know how much. How much have you gotten into crypto?
I'm not steeped in it.
There are these coins, but I don't even think I think the coins are just
digital
ephemeral
codes, right?
Yeah, it's a weird thing. I don't know much about it.
It's an environmental hazard. They create so much energy mining these encrypted, chains. Forgive me if I'm not conversant in crypto language. I'm going to get yelled at by a bunch of crypto.
I'm sure someone out there who really knows what they're talking about will watch us and laugh their asses off. But the point that we get is, don't do this.
Right. I've never heard argument about how cryptocurrency helps anything. How if this was a solution without a problem. Currency worked just fine.
Okay, no. one thing it could do is if you are debanked, right? If the government, you know how the government bill may decide to cancel you, just like Twitter can kick you off their platform, banks can debank you. They can basically, and so you could essentially find yourself where, like, Wells Fargo says, Bill Scher's too radical for us to do business with him.
Well,
He's toast.
I mean, what bank says you can't open a checking account if you have the money for a checking account?
Well, this is a concern that some people, certainly on the right, have, that if you hold views that are unpopular, that just like a social media platform could ban you, or like YouTube might demonetize.
But this is made up. Like no one actually does this.
I think that, didn't Canada do this against, or threaten this, or do this against some of the truckers in the convoy or whatever that was?
I don't know the specifics.
I think they might have, or at least threatened it.
We're not going to let you open a checking account.
It's not that. It's basically, we're going to freeze your money because you're an anti-Semite or something to that effect.
I would want to get.
I mean, Bill, I'm playing, as you know, I'm playing devil's advocate here, but I'm explaining to you.
I mean, it may be that you can't like take out a loan to fund a horrible project. But as far as
I don't think it's just, no, it's not. Whether this very well may be overwrought, but what I'm explaining to you is one of the reasons that people like crypto as opposed to U.S. currency is that there is a fear that that holding unpopular positions will not only get you kicked off of social media platforms, but now that everything, we don't deal in cash anymore. Now that everything is done electronically, that they could essentially shut you down, your ability to like have electricity in your house could be turned off.
This is from February of this year, New York Times story. With the capital streets cleared of the heavy trucks and cars that made some of them impassable for 3 long weeks of protests, Canadian authorities said Tuesday they were lifting freezes on hundreds of bank accounts associated with protest organizers and Canadians who had blocked Ottawa streets with their vehicles. Isabelle Jacques, an assistant deputy minister in Canada's Department of Finance, told the House of Commons committee that the banks began unlocking accounts on Monday, that no more finances will be locked up. Quote, the vast majority of assets are in the process of being unfrozen, she said. When Prime Minister Justin Trudeau decided a week ago to invoke his country's Emergencies Act for the first time in Canadian history to quell the unrest, it gave the police sweeping new powers to go after the finances of the protesters. I mean, this is literally an extreme circumstance.
Okay, but if you're so, I agree, but and you know, I was very very critical of those so-called protesters, and I wrote about it at The Beast. But if you are an American, and remember, there were a lot of American right-wingers, including Ted Cruz, who were cheering on the truckers, okay, and the protesters. If you are an American right-winger and you are cheering on these protesters and you think their cause is noble, and then you see that Trudeau has frozen their bank accounts and their money, they can't spend money, they can't spend their own money. It's a hop, skip, and a jump. If you're paranoid enough.
They were breaking the law. I mean, they weren't just holding picket signs outside of a building. They were violating the law and making the city ungovernable.
But number one, point conceded. I agree with you. I was very critical of them. If you are a right-wing American activist and you believe that they were on the right side, that they were noble, that their cause was pure, you could envision a scenario where it's a slippery slope. Now, if you're against gay marriage, you can't cash a check. Okay, I'm just telling you, I may be a little more familiar with this world of what they're saying than you are, and this is what they're saying. And so this is one of the. I'm not saying this is the primary reason that crypto is popular. I don't think it is the primary reason, but this is one reason.
Well, it is a hyper libertarian concept that we're going to create a society that's not beholden to the rules of governments. That's bad. That's not a that's bad for society. And I don't want to see regulation. I mean, obviously some of the crypto folks are going to be mad that we want us to be this pure libertarian thing, and now you're going to regulate it. It's not going to be fun anymore.
But Bill, this goes back. Let me just say, this goes full circle. Okay, this is where we started off talking about Nick Fuentes. Okay, and I talked about the whole Taliban. Well, by the way, he literally has praised the Taliban. Okay, but it wasn't the Taliban specifically. It was more just radical Islamists. But you have to understand that a lot of the sort of radical right today, they do not like America. They're not patriotic, flag waving, Uber. Like Nick Fuentes was rooting for the Taliban because he does not like America. He thinks America is a force for evil in the world that we are exporting.
He praised Russia. I mean, I saw him literally praise Russia at one of his conferences.
Exactly. We are exporting trans rights and radical homosexuality and consumerism and whatever it is. America is a force for evil according to them. And so, of course, you would want to have a currency that goes around America if you can. That's part of the. I don't think this is the primary. I think a lot of people just are trying to make money. A lot of people invested in crypto because they thought, "Wow, this is going to pay off." But there is an element of it that supports it for that reason.
Woke Matt Lewis defending trans rights.
Not defending it necessarily, but look, here's what I wrote a piece in Thanksgiving, Bill, a piece for Thanksgiving, about gratitude and Thanksgiving, and I think America is the greatest country in the world, and it's apparent to me that there are a lot of people, probably on the left, but certainly on the right, who don't think America's that good, who think that it's a horrible country and that we're not free. And I think I have a pretty great life. I think I'm blessed, and I think we live in a great country that's worth defending. And I don't understand the lack of gratitude and the complaining and the sense that things are worse than they've ever been. Whether we're talking about medicine, vaccines, peace, prosperity, freedom, I'm not sure when you would want to live or when or where, if you got to pick any place that you could live. I mean, granted, look, it would be 1998. In America, for me, but whatever. I mean, this is a pretty great time and place to be alive, I would say.
Well, let's leave it on that optimistic note, Matt.
All right, Bill. Always good talking to you. I apologize for hogging all the Thanksgiving chatter. You didn't get to tell us about yours too much.
I mean, I'm not too much to say, except that the only innovation of not making a turkey is I endorse. We like pre-cooked turkey breasts we used to warm up. So we ate turkey. So you do the whole bird. Like, when's it done? The thing is, we don't live in a society where we make giant birds on a regular basis anymore.
That's true.
So no one's practiced at it. You have to refresh your memory from a year prior and how long it's supposed to be in there. Does the thermometer actually work? Is this part actually done? Sitting around for 3 hours trying to figure it out like that. That's what kills every Thanksgiving.
Well, I would say that I am grateful to you, and part of why I'm grateful is for your yearly WKRPN Cincinnati tweet thread.
Thank you.
Which led me down a rabbit hole of watching YouTube videos of people involved in making the show, talking about it. So thank you for that.
Yes, for those who did not catch it, that you have to. If you're streaming it on Prime Video or wherever, you got to stop it at the big guy Johnny Fever scene and then look for dogs, WKRP dogs on YouTube to get the proper scene with the original music. Because otherwise, the whole scene is shot, and quite frankly, the whole first half of the episode is shot. It's a pretty limp first half of the episode if you don't have that scene in there. It makes the whole show.
I'm still a little sketchy about turkeys not being able to fly. I think some of them can, maybe for short distances. But whatever, it's a classic episode.
All right. I will see you next week, right?
All right, you got it. We'll be back here next week in the DMZ. See you later.
Take care.